upgrades for performance and stuff are really gonna come from the stuff that's called in the cabinet. So it's the techie devices that will speed it up.
So we're jumping around here, and I don't, if we're being recorded,
No, we're recorded, yeah.
did it just start being recorded? Anyway,
It stopped
oh,
when we were by ourselves.
Mark is in.
He's in now?
Mark's in.
All right, so he's in.
hi, Mark, where
I
are
don't know
you?
what his problem was. Or what our problem
Is he
was.
in? Hello? I don't.
Mark, you're on mute. I want somebody, later in. Can you hear me?
Sorry, I was muted. I could hear you fine. Thank you.
Starting first, Mark, with impressions, what will happen at the select board meeting. And Dusty was saying it's mostly going to be their questions and maybe 5% presentation. Do you want to say any more now that Mark's on?
Yeah, I was just saying that there are already some strongly held opinions about which route we should take by various members of the board. So I think what they're expecting in the meeting is to be able to discuss it more than to hear about it. And so I sent them all the report, so they have the report. They can read it as deeply as they want to. And so, yeah, it's
Understood. So what you're suggesting is that maybe this will get more focused on public versus private partnership?
probably, yeah.
Okay.
And one of the misunderstandings I had is I thought the consolidated communications approach or option was part of what was in the report that you had put together for us. So I thought your report was going to kind of cover all the options, at least as for comparison's sake. But the consolidated option is one of the ones that I think some people are looking at. So that's some of the discussion that we'll be having about it.
I wasn't invited to the consolidated presentation, so I don't know anything about it other than that somebody said they had Fidium or Consolidated come in.
Yeah, that was, I don't know how that turned out, actually. That was an email and the chair took, I guess she talked about this with each board member individually, so it wasn't a discussion on email. But I don't know if we're going to have a representative consolidated or not. Because my thought for this meeting and this portion of the meeting is that we would discuss the report that we paid for. This is kind of like the other end of that, getting that ball rolling. Now we're here to hear the report that we paid for and start to discuss what options we want to do.
I think Evan had thought, actually, he had been thinking of that date to have Fidium come and present to the board. So in his, he felt we had to have another option, which we did.
Well, I don't know if we're going to make the deadlines that we want to get to, but I think the board wants to be in the lead on this process instead of having people brought in to present to us. I think we'd rather
They would,
invite people to come in when we're ready to hear from them.
yeah, okay.
You know, we don't, if there's an option that nobody has any interest in doing, we don't need to hear a presentation. So it's, I think more of a preliminary discussion now is what we can anticipate the board doing.
Okay.
Can I interrupt a second?
Yeah,
Tom Joyce is on, he's the head of the budget committee.
Right.
That's it. I just like everybody to go around, so we'll pick you up and to say who you want.
I'm Judy Tonko. I'm the chair of the Dresden Committee.
Tommy Davis from the Woolwich Committee.
Don Gleason, Dresden.
Carla Dickstein, chair of Wiscasset Committee.
And I'm Dusty Jones, Selectman Wiscasset. Hi, Tom.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for letting me crash your party and come up to speed.
No, I'm glad you're here, because that was another thing I wanted to bring up was, we needed the budget committee to go over this report as well.
Yeah, Dennis mentioned that to me, and Marty sent me along the report, which I've read in detail. I'm not certain exactly what the timing will be, but as soon as there's a step to take, we'll jump right on it.
Okay. We were just going to go by the agenda to, we had some impressions. Many of us went to the broadband summit last week. So one of my impressions, and Don was talking about his impressions of it. One impression I had, the biggest one, my takeaway was how hard the money's going to be get from what's called the BEAD money from the Infrastructure Act. And that's coming later. It's a bigger pot of money, but it's going to be even more restrictive than this round. And as we know, and Marcus said as well, it behooves us to get in there now in terms of a competitive process. Mark, did you have any other takeaways on that? It just sounded terrible to get, terrible to administer and report on from what the guy on Thursday said.
You're such a glass half full, Carla.
I know, I've always been like this.
Box coming from the feds. No, I understand. No, I agree. My impression was the state is pushing out money faster than they are comfortable with, and they really are building the airplane as they try to fly it. It's a very unsettled situation, I think, at the state. They're trying to build MCA, add people on. They're trying to get money out as quickly as possible in regards to the federal guidance. And they really don't have the full systems in place around financing and other elements of what it's going to take to deploy this funding in an efficient and economical manner. So I'm a little concerned that the feds, that the state is a little over their skis at the moment. That was my major impression there. Other than that, I hope everybody was in the room because I got my golden award here, my old modem. Somebody gave me an award, so that was nice. But other than that, that's what it was.
Yeah, and that's one of the things actually I wanted to mention here was that to congratulate you for receiving that award, because reality, you've been a pioneer and have been out there helping towns to do things that wouldn't have happened otherwise. So kudos to you and to Excellent.
When was that? I missed it totally.
Yeah, very
It was
good.
early. That's good. Sorry, Mark. The other thing is the financing discussion. I mean, there was great promise, and Mark, you touched on this, that there would be new, development finance mechanisms that would come in to help. I mean, they are providing, Tom, for your benefit, they're providing almost 75% of the funding out of the grants, but they want skin in the game from the towns to show that, you're in and you're serious about this. But it's also a high hurdle in terms of towns wanting to take the risk. And I was hoping for more creative finance by now. I was talking to Carlos Mello, who heads the Finance Authority of Maine. And it's the same discussion we had when I was working at CEI. We were looking for different mechanisms. And I don't think it's progressed. Our former CFO is now their CFO, David Weddick, the British guy that spoke. And it's like, it's the same list with no closure on it. So I don't think we're going to find it in that direction, which we were.
Didn't seem like there were really any new ideas on the
Not
funding.
yet.
I mean, I'm not very familiar with how municipal lending and bonding and all that stuff works, but nothing sounded very cutting edge.
Well,
It sounds like they're just mainstream, which isn't bad if it works.
That's the cheapest way to go on board, but then the town is on the hook for the GO bond. What other towns are doing, what the Mid-Coast is doing, and they described it there, they have the Mid-Coast Internet Coalition or Development Corporation, and they know their towns will not sign up. I mean, that there's a huge barrier here. But they are going to towns with almost no that are unserved, Tom, this means that they're considered with no proper internet, under 120, 100 down, 20 up. And looking for them because they will get the biggest grants, similar to Dresden, your situation where you'll get bigger grants. And trying to do the Vermont model, which is you start with equity, you start with where you can get the grants, and then as you prove the model, you have surplus and you build it out to the other areas. That's going to be harder for us to do. So anyway, I just thought I'd touch on that before we jump into.
Another thing that was mentioned, verified what Mark has been telling us, that this is the time to get the grant. This be the best chance, timeline, to make this next.
Yeah. So
Whenever that's due. Do we have any timeline on that, Mark?
On the next grant round, did you say, Marty?
Well, two things. One, when does the grants that are in the process, when do they get reported? And two, when do we have to get stuff together to get into the next grant round?
hasn't been said.
I'm sorry, it was hard to hear the first part, Marty. I apologize, but I'll answer, and then if I'm wrong, you tell me. This current grant round, Axiom, as a provider and partner with 3 communities, is in this grant round and under review right now. There are 29 applications in this current grant round for $40 million. Just as a scale, just to help you understand what that means, Axiom's projects, just the 3 Axiom projects, adds up to around $10 million in construction projects out of the 40 million, and there are 29 applications in this round. That round is expected, this round is expected to be awarded. They just pushed the date from on January. They originally said January 6th. They're thinking now mid to late January, they'll make an announcement of awards on this round, which probably means the March, April opening of the next round may get pushed. It may not, but it may get pushed because I'm assuming what's going to happen is, and there is a lot of feedback that's going to be pushed back onto MCA from this round. The application had several flaws in it that will need to be corrected. And I think they will also look at the modeling and the weighting of the projects and determine whether or not they want to tweak any of those. And if they do, that's gonna push out the next round a little bit. That said, I will only say one last point to that, which is that, as I mentioned, the state is under an enormous amount of pressure to get the money out because these monies have timelines on them. Meaning, you must expend by this date kind of thing. So, and then, so there is some pressure for them to move along quickly.
That's to our advantage, though, that it gets pushed out in the spring. Gives us more time if indeed we decide to go forward on an application.
Right. As I mentioned in the last, sorry. Yes? Oh, sorry. So as I mentioned, I think last time, timeline wise, you must have secured your match when you apply.
Yeah.
So that's super important. And for municipalities, communities, as you all know, that's a process that takes several iterations and special town meetings likely and these kinds of things. And, some kind of information campaign to get people the information. And so you will be doing that, basically, if you decide to move forward, as soon as you decide to move forward, you need to really begin that process in securing that match, minimum of that match.
Yeah. Well, I think we're in the thick of it, actually. Anybody have questions, Tom or anybody else? Has Evan joined us or not? No.
Well, with what Mark just relayed, he has 10% of the population, right? He's got 3 of the 29 apps going for 25% of the money. And we also heard that those that don't get it in this round will be basically at the head of the list in the next round. So slipping from 4Q to 1Q and that one going from 1Q to 2Q is likely to continue to erode and the list just gets longer. And the projects get delayed. That's terrible news for any town.
I will say just to add to that, Don, maybe on a plus side, but a little unknown, is as you may be aware, Axiom was part of a state grant round with NTIA for almost $30 million, in which 3 communities got 100% funded through that round in earlier this year. So there will be federal pots of money coming from the feds that are not necessarily allocated to the states that could be available.
Correct, and that's what I heard with USDA, for instance, because we have basically, lack of a better term, an agricultural district that going to smart agriculture would be very beneficial, but that is not through the main channel. That is separately going after the USDA funds or grants themselves.
Yeah, they
So-
mentioned that at the summit.
So, yeah, there'll be other funding streams, and I think they may emerge to a greater extent as the main process or the core process gets delayed. If their schedule erodes, there's going to be a lot more interest in how else can we fund this?
Mhm.
And on the negative side of my sunny side of that comment, USDA, which we were awarded 3 projects in 2019 through the Reconnect program, which is billions of dollars being put on the street, was I've been awarded across the board using a number of agency awards across the national awards as well as state awards. That was by far the heaviest lift I had ever worked on, and it is an extremely onerous program.
Yeah.
It is very challenging. So
Are you involved with the Aroustic project?
correct. Yep.
You are.
Yep.
You know all about it.
I do.
Okay.
What's that?
Aroustic was one, Monhegan was another, and Roque Bluffs was the third. None of them are built, and they were awarded in early 2020.
You know, one other thing that I'll just share that I took away from the conference that doesn't probably matter to any of us, but I didn't know that the fixed wireless technology had advanced and was being deployed as much as it was. That's I suppose a solution for filling in little spots or whatever, but I was surprised by that.
You went to that workshop.
In our
I
town,
didn't go to the workshop, but I heard from people that did. So it was
Red Zone is the
Red Zone is the big
primary vendor in our town.
And then there's 2 other up and coming ones in the state.
Well, I was just surprised that that technology is improved enough to make it a player, at least in certain situations.
You know what the speeds are?
Yeah. It's just for-
They're on the bottom, they're at the FCC.
Not
lower.
broadband.
They claim, that's right, Red Zone claim to have much greater performance than what people are experiencing, but everybody's doing it, right? I mean, I look at the FCC maps and I'm at 1 gig and 35, and I'm never higher than 300 at 12. So the maps are wrong, but
That's a whole other
it's
discussion.
a major
Yeah.
discussion. But
And I-
fixed wireless actually uses fiber to their towers and then transmits from there. And it's growing as the fiber networks extend, you know, they're buying into it. So it is, as you point out, Tommy, that it is an alternative.
I'd like to add that earlier today, Evan, Colin, and myself were emailing back and forth. And I had contacted Tony Reed with the municipal bond outfit that we spoke at the conference. And she said the bond rate has gone up to 4.5%, which you have no idea where it's going to go from there. And Mark based his calculations, he thinks of 4% for 20 years. And I asked Mark to update that back in the calculations. And Carl had asked previously to see what it would look like if we had a 35% take rate, which is probably more realistic for discussing. And Mark said he'd try to get to it before the end of the year.
I'm just convinced of that last part. Yeah.
What, 35%? You think we could do it on 25%?
Well, I think we could have a campaign, a public information campaign to target a much higher rate. And I think we could achieve that.
Well, hopefully we could. My concern was what's the minimal we would need. In Mark's projection, Mark, you can talk to this because you did the projections, but the initial report we got was 25%. And I thought,
And that's
anyway,
important. Break-even analysis should
Yeah.
be that's where your absolute minimum.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And what happens if we don't make it?
Well, see, that's kind of
That's the risk.
that's an approach to answering the question that I would rather not take. I would rather take the approach of, trying things to see how high we can get it, because the higher we get it, the more revenue. If we own it, the higher we get that rate, the more revenue.
Whatever, yeah, I agree, but we have to be realistic. If we don't meet that rate, we could be losing our share. We could have risks to meet that.
Yeah, well, I think it makes so much sense to me that if people don't want it, then there's some other reason they don't want it.
We can always move on.
That we're some kind of an anomaly in the internet world, and the people who live here just aren't that interested. But that would surprise me if that was okay.
But right now, I'm paying $7 a month for my internet through Spectrum.
Well, we know that they're going to keep lowering prices in this kind of environment, but that's not.
I'm paying 80 and they raised it twice on me this year, so I don't know, what rhyme or reason does there exist in their prices? I don't think there is. It's just whatever they can get away with on individual customers because they don't have any competition.
Well, let's,
Consolidated said that they don't mess around with prices. This is a national rate. Where everybody gets it nationally.
well,
They don't look at individual.
So in analyzing that, you need to look at, have their profits increased disproportionately over the last few years because they're setting their own rate. Right,
Yeah,
so, and that would project out to the future is that they'll just keep raising.
Yeah.
Which for us, the argument is, that's why I inappropriately use the term spectrum too. Because when it was Time Warner Cable or whatever they brought in the first time, it was here and now it's up here. So we could expect the same thing from Fidium.
the point is we don't control it. We don't own it and we don't control
Well, again, it's finding who has been skillful in negotiating. Because if it's a granite wall and we can't get through it, then we'll never, look, these little towns will never get through it. Right? But if somebody's done it before, we can, in essence, find those tricks of the trade
Well,
to leverage them. That's where the knowing
Yeah, the
about
New
something we
Hampshire-
didn't know about,
yeah,
New Hampshire.
exactly.
Exactly.
So
That's,
why don't we put that on the agenda? We'll see what, like the next meeting, we'll do research on New Hampshire and make sure we know.
Is that Vermont or New Hampshire?
It's
that's,
New Hampshire that has this model with Fidium, but Vermont has set up consolidated districts where the state divided the whole state. And the state assumed they won't allow the towns to go for bonding. They don't want the towns to take the risk. With what they are doing is putting up a lot of debt capital, loan capital up front to get them going. And it's taken a while. They've had their problems as well, but it's taken to take off. But what they're doing is creating scale, with regional utilities similar to what Maine could do if we wanted to band together in utility districts. So it's a model to look at, but I think you're right. We have to look at what New Hampshire did and what the ins and outs of that would be. And I think there are providers. Mark, do you know much about that one? Because it came up, the New Hampshire model that Fidium has told us that one model, or they described it at the conference. Sarah, I forgot her name, from Fidium.
Davis. Yep.
Yeah, they did one model with New Hampshire that had public ownership. Do you know much about that one?
I'm extremely skeptical.
Yeah.
Well, right, you got consolidated with the New Hampshire model.
And in New Hampshire, besides, I'd be very, very skeptical of that statement. Everything they've done in Maine everything they've done, as far as I know, has been private ownership. Nothing wrong with that. They're a private company, publicly traded. That's how their business model works. So I would just be a little skeptical of whatever she says for public ownership.
From the conversation. Yeah, Judy confirms that from the conversation she had with Fidium, that because that's one of the things we were talking about was the New Hampshire model in Dresden, and it was like, will you be the only ones? Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but
You talked to Fidium specifically.
I talked with Simon about, what are the other places around that we could pair up with. Same conversation that I had with you, Mark, about,
Yep.
what other places are there that we could pair up with. And Simon said absolutely nobody in Maine is working on that model with them.
Oh, okay. Well, definitely, we need to know about it.
But it doesn't mean you attempt to play hardball. We gotta try to play hardball. Same, you've heard my concerns about, when you deal with a vendor and they throw up the wall, it doesn't necessarily mean it's enough, right? That you've got to figure out how to work with it or get around it so that you're getting fat. Because our responsibility to the town is making sure we're getting the best deal, not only in the short term, but more importantly, in the long term.
Right.
Because the legacy is, that Judy, look what she did to us, and it's 20 years later.
So I want to move us along to the report, because that is what's going to be discussed for us in Wiscasset on Tuesday. We've got Tom on the phone, who's read it, which is great, has comments or feedback, and you guys have your own input into this as well. I don't, Mark, do you have comments, or you want to, we've talked this morning, but maybe what would be productive, at least for Wiscasset, would be to hear what Tom has to say, because he's a new voice. And, nothing's going to happen unless the budget committee, well, I suppose something could happen, but it's unlikely unless the budget committee was supportive. So Tom, do you want to talk with us about what your impressions are?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little reticent to do it because I'm coming up cold and this isn't my particular area of expertise. And I haven't gone through the ramp up that you guys have. I've just read the Axiom report and the financials that came over. I guess a couple of things occur to me off the top of my head. One is that if I understand correctly, through this arrangement, we end up getting paid $30 a connect. And I couldn't tell anything about what Axiom's portion of that was going to be, portion of the overall was going to be. In the earlier part of the report, it gave some examples of typical customers. I think it had, a typical fiber customer spending $69, $70 a month. So I assume from that we get $30 and they get $40, if those numbers are correct. What I was really interested in is, for their portion of it, they're carrying a lot of water for making this work. Really, they're the operational expertise on the whole thing. What are we getting in terms of long-term customer service commitment. Elsewhere in the report, it said, look, you're going to make a long-term, exclusive arrangement with us as the service provider. Maybe other service providers will come in. It was a little unclear just reading the report. Are there multiple service providers over time, or is it just Axiom and who does what? My only frame of reference for understanding this is a friend of mine runs the municipally owned broadband utility in Greenfield, Massachusetts, and they're doing pretty well. But the ramp up was super hard. To kind of Dusty's comments earlier, the challenge was getting people to sign up, and they were behind the curve in the early stages of that, to the point where they replaced management a couple of times. I suspect their model is different because they have dedicated town managers working with the provider, as I understand it. But it's unclear from this report kind of what gets put up to deal with customer service. Tom calls because the thing is out. Who does communications on outages? Hey, I'm having a problem. Come help me figure this out. I have Spectrum now. I hate Spectrum, but I can get somebody on the phone, So who does that? How many of those people are there? And I guess it was all sort of like, in my mind, I can see what the construction costs are. I can see what the upfront costs are. I see what we're on the hook to go get in terms of either a bond or other financing. I have no visibility into the long-term, what are you going to provide? What's the cost of that? What's the total offer to make this thing fly? Because all these things are great when things are going great, but they're really bad when they're not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Mark, I think you can address that. And I've seen most of that in various things Mark has given us, but Mark, do you want to address it?
Sure. Can you hear me? Mike?
Yeah.
I keep having, we get a delivery, I don't know, 17 times a day, and I have 3 dogs, and they all like to bark out front, so I put it on mute for a second, but there's Tom now. I think Tom has it correct in that the solution that I provided as one option was a payback to the town of $30 per subscriber per month. So it is based on subscriber revenue. And that $30 is based on 3 pricing categories: $59.99, $64.99, and $109.99. So you can see the difference of what Axiom gets out of those customers. So on a $60 connection, I give you 30, I keep 30. On a $64.99 connection, I keep 35, you keep 30. It's a fixed relationship from our payback to the community. And it's based on pricing that is based on a percentage of takers at each of those different levels of service. So each level of service, we're an ISP, right? We're an internet service provider, so we have service all over, in the field. So we have a good general understanding of what percentage of people will take the lowest cost service, who will take the middle cost, and who will take the highest level of service. 60-30-10 is how I modeled that. 60% taking the lowest, 30 in the middle, 10 in the, and I have I was going to say sophisticated, but let's not call it that. I have a pretty good pro forma 10-year model internally.
That Mark was what I was going to ask you for, because trying to back into it from the kind of, this is a sales pitch. It's a very good one. It's very helpful in terms of speaking like normal person language and getting you ramped up, but it doesn't give you a pro forma. And I think the budget committee, at least in Wiscasset, we need to see a pro forma in order to understand exactly how this breaks down.
Yeah, and I think in this, I don't have much of a problem with that level of transparency, because you will end up seeing all of my expense categories and all of that, which I'm not that bothered by, but just know that that's what you'll be getting. I used to provide that in my reports, but it was too complicated and too messy, and it led to too much of a mess in the side of the report. So I don't do that anymore. And but I'm happy to provide that to the budget committee if you'd like to take a look at it. Not too bad, not a very heavy lift for me. And I can explain that in front of the budget committee, or you can ask questions of me, Tom, as you move.
Yeah, that might be the time for me to kind of go through my questions. It's the other part of it then is for your, your slice of that, you're doing a lot of things. Will you be able to sort of itemize out that, hey, look, for your, you've got a low, medium and high customer. With the average customer, we're going to know kind of what you're making. For that, what are we getting in terms of dedicated, are there people available? You will roll trucks when there's a problem, et cetera, because there's no head count built into this at all on the town side, except for like part of an accountant. And, I looked at it and said, who's doing all the work? Who's paying for that? How does that get done? That's kind of a black box at this point. And that's kind of all I.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, no, I maybe could have been clearer. That's our job. Well, that's what we do now. We do all of the billing. We would do all of the phone call, tech support. We would do all of the break fix, roll trucks, that kind of thing. So we do soup to nuts what every ISP does, including what Spectrum does, what Consolidated does. We just do it under an Axiom logo. It's Axiom people who do that work. So you'd have all that support available to you. This would not require a town, let's call it department, right? This is not what we want the town to have a very light touch. We don't want a lot of expense lying with the town. What we want to be able to do is try to create a tax neutral situation where the revenues coming back to the town cover the bonding cost of the project so that there's no taxpayer outlay. The risk, Tom, and this is a budget committee, this is where the budget committee always goes. There are two risks. One is you don't reach take rates, right? If you don't reach take rates, it's as simple as that. You get a reduced amount of money. If you exceed take rates, you get more money. The question that Carla and Marty were suggesting was for me to model this at a lower, what is the minimum takes required to cover the cost of the bonding, leaving us, or to cover the cost of the bonding and the expenses that are going to be on the town. And that's what we can certainly do that. It's just going to take some time to do that. It take me a few days to do that, but I can definitely put that together. So risk number one is we don't meet take rate. That said, there's a lot of misunderstanding of what that really means, because you're still getting the revenue from whoever is taking the project, taking the service. So for example, if you're talking about, it's $30, sorry, I'm doing my calculator right in front of me, has real time, $30, right, times $30 times 12, right, 30 per customer, $30 times 12 is $360 per customer per year that you would be getting back in revenue share. That $360 has to cover, and the number of customers have to cover all of those detailed fees that I had in the bond in the projections. If you come short, the question is how short? Because it's likely we're going to have customers. There are people who do not like Spectrum. There are people who are interested in community projects. There are people who are interested because the cost of a Spectrum service is, relatively speaking, more expensive. And you get the option of cutting the cord and making some cost savings within your own budget. That's contained in the report. You can kind of see it. So there's some advantages. We are at least trying to expel out the advantages. So when you think about, okay, we modeled out, I'm just looking at Woolwich, 755 customers, a 40% take rate. If you come in at 30%, what does that mean? If you come in at 20%, what does that mean? You will still have revenue. Will it be enough? And at some certain point, the taxpayer will be on the hook to make up that difference between the bond payment and whatever revenue comes in. There is a delta there that will occur. So that's one risk. The second risk is, and I think this has been talked about, and I think it's a minor risk, but it's always spoken of, and that is Spectrum is a billion-dollar company, multi-billion-dollar company. They can do whatever they want, whenever they want to. And they come in and just crush whatever community broadband project is out there. That's not been the case so far, but they have gotten more aggressive in their pricing nationwide, but it is built on a technology that is failing and is going away. Spectrum will not be the same company in 5 years it is right now. They are losing customers left and right. Everybody's going streaming, one pipe to the home. So there's that. But the second risk is either Consolidated comes in, or Spectrum, two very large companies, and overbuilds, or reduces pricing to such a degree that you don't get your take rates, or that you basically wither on the vine. Those are the two big risks.
Yeah, okay, well, that's very helpful. I won't kill your meeting now, but I think you're right. I think if we get to a budget committee discussion, the mitigation is the important part. Part of it is, I mean, you can see that, I think you got in the first year, if I recall, 165,000, in cash flow.
Yeah.
So I think that you've got a lot of room to work with there, but the other side of mitigating falling short is that there's a reason why you fall short, right? I've been a startup CEO twice, and I'm still in therapy, from recovering from it. When things go bad, everybody goes nuts. Who fixes it? How does it get back on track is really critical to understand, because the town won't have the resources or the capability to do it. I mean, we're basically entirely in your control, frankly. And so that's an area I would like to drill on.
Yeah, fair enough. And I would only add to that I said it at the broadband meeting last week that I was at, where we are not everybody's cup of tea, and communities all have different thresholds of what they would like to have, what they would like to see. I would only say that this is a model where you have more control than the town has ever had before over what's happening with their citizens as far as connectivity. So many towns see that as a benefit. Some get afraid and see that as a risk. So fair enough. And so I'm comfortable either way, and I'm absolutely comfortable, frankly. This particular report does have a strong point of view, as you know. That was done intentionally because the committee wanted that strong point of view, with the idea that you could then take this and compare it to the other solutions that may be out there that you may encounter as you move forward. That said, I have a pretty good understanding of the two major incumbents in your community and what they would provide or not provide. And I'm happy to discuss that in a very transparent and clear. I'm happy to talk through what I see them being able to provide, and what those benefits are and what the risks are on their side, on your side, for them to come in and do that work. So I'm comfortable doing all of that and prepared to do that as people ask questions, no issues.
Is it true? I understood that most or all of the other ISPs do not do the cost share. Is that right? Is that just Acxiom's model?
Pretty much. It maybe GWI. We will see in this next round. They're partnered with a couple of communities in the Mid-Coast, as you suggested, Carla. So we'll see what that cost share looks like. They have a slightly different, more complicated model. They're really under a BUD, broadband utility district, where GWI is acting as the white label to the BUD and providing all of the things that I just talked about on behalf of the utility district. So a little bit slightly different. So, and the utility district is then paying them to do that work. So the utility district is receiving all of the funds and then paying the ISP to work on their behalf in a white label situation where the ISP is seen as the broadband utility district. Quite a bit different lot of interesting permutations in that model, which I could speak to for a couple of hours. I've seen it because I was a consultant in an area where they provided their model to the communities, and I was charged with evaluating it. So I understand what it is. They're the closest that comes to what Axiom does in working with communities in Maine. Nobody else is doing that.
Right. They're also a B Corp where they're trying to do more community.
They're also a B Corp, right? Sorry to mention that.
No, where did I get lost on this? Oh, I don't know. For Tom's benefit, the state set up broadband utility districts in 2015. It's in statute, and that's what Mark is talking about. The districts can only issue revenue bonds. They can't issue, obviously, an obligation bond, even though they're working through the towns or a combination of towns. I know that Vermont prohibits, as I said before, GO bonds, but they are pushing the revenue bond model. But as far as I know, you can't get a revenue bond unless you have a track record. Is that correct? Do you know about all this, Tom?
I believe that is correct, but I'm not super expert in all aspects of bonding.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it's something we'd like to know. I gather a revenue bond costs more, Mark. Is that correct? Probably. Because you're not, yeah. But if it means de-risking the town, it might be worth it if the business model worked.
I mean, that is another option that I am considering in another RFP that I'm applying for. I'm offering an opportunity to bring in an investor because the numbers look pretty good, and the investor would provide the match to the project. In that scenario, though, the town will not own the infrastructure, but but we're nice guys, so we believe in community-driven process. So we will still provide some level of return to the towns in that relationship, and allow the towns to have a pretty strong voice in the project, because that's how Axiom. We're driven that way. That's our mission in my company. And since I run the show, I can say yes or no to anything I want. So we're providing that option, but that's not for everybody either, right? That's basically what Fidium is doing, right? The only reason they're expanding is because they got a big, large influx of cash from a big, large institutional investor, and they are expanding their fiber offering across the state after for 10 years telling everybody you don't need fiber and you don't need symmetrical service. All of a sudden they found religion, and here we go, because they got this big influx of cash. So, you know, that model works and is perfectly legit, obviously, in the marketplace, and is perfectly something that towns can consider working with Consolidated or Fidium, whatever you want to call it, same company. So whatever you want to call it. But, you know, comfortable, you know, people need to get comfortable with whatever the model is for their town. And if somebody's going to come in and do it for free, then you don't need to do any of this, right? I mean, if they're willing to do it for no cost, I have not found that yet, but that may be a possibility. I mean, I would ask Fidium that. Are you just going to come in and do this? We're in. Come on in, build it out. Every home, fiber.
Yeah, well, they're in the grant business too. We know that.
Yes.
How to position and how to put up money, you know.
Typically
So
they
we,
do.
yeah. So Tom, the committee hasn't, the select board, well, Sarah and Dusty, you weren't there for Consolidated, but Sarah was there. I don't think we had any of the other, oh, Terry was there. Yeah, we did have some of the select board there.
Where you're talking about?
Oh, you were there for Consolidated, yeah. So the select board, I think then everybody.
You're talking about the meeting we had.
Yeah, I mean,
Office.
yeah,
What is Axiom?
Consolidated.
it was Consolidated, the one we did with Consolidated. That's
Yeah,
right,
two
most of the select board was there, even though, what's his name, just left early.
That's
but Bill left early.
And James was there too.
Right, right. So let's open it up. I mean, other comments and questions about the report that Mark gave us. I don't know if you guys want to talk individually with Mark or, because there was some expectation that maybe the sections, and Mark, that we talked about earlier, that some of the sections on the other providers would have more focus. But I think, at least from my personal point of view, I wanted to see this model particularly fleshed out to the extent it was. But I don't know if you guys, if you have comments or things that you want to
I
discuss.
also,
Yeah,
as I mentioned to the folks in the room, with the version we received in October, I think it was October 22nd, give or take. I had gone through and I'd done a lot of edits to it. We also recognize that the technology alternatives that most of us, and not me being multi-hatted as being on the committee, but also a selectman, know that, you know, it's a big gap there. We're talking cable, DSL, fiber, satellite. What is this fixed wireless stuff, which is actually fiber and wireless? And what is that? And have you guys really looked at it? Blah, 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 blah. But I went through the document. I put a functional table of contents. I did a number of other cleanups that I will share with you, Mark. So then you can make the call on whether you want to re-release. I can have this done. Well, my first question is, how much change was there from the October publication to the one that we received today?
Depends on what you mean, but generally speaking, there were quite a few changes.
The core, because I know the appendices are attached, right? But if the core document changed a lot, then I can just do a compare and move
No,
from there.
I think you should take a look and compare, but I would think that the major part of the document remains as it was in the.
Yeah, no.
But,
'Cause-
pardon me, Don, just one point to that. If I'm going to remodel everything under the new, with Maine Municipal's updated interest rates, that is going to make a significant change across the board with all of the project costing stuff and revenue expense modeling, which I'm fine with, I will do. Secondly, as you heard, at least somebody asked about doing that, or I think let me say it this way, all I think are in agreement that they would like a worst case scenario model, basically, that says this will cover your cost. If you're at this amount, this level of takes, this will cover your cost, but do no more. It will not throw off any surplus dollars, so that you know what the bottom line take rate is for your communities. As far as, so back to your point, Don, if you felt like the reading of the document was not clear enough, or you felt like you wanted to add particular elements to it, I am very open and would love to see what you have, and would discuss it with you and add as we see fit to make the document clearer or more compelling in whatever way you would like it to be made that way.
Well, the reality is it's a living document, right? So with each iteration, you get from a feasibility study to more of a design document, right? Where if you're trying to drive towards what are my actual costs going to be? I think you've done the initial report. You did a great job in presenting the things and driving it towards that public-private model. And I'm fine with that. The next iteration is really the towns need to say, tell me more. So as discussed on this call, moving towards a pro forma or providing additional elaboration is basically versioning that document or appending that document with additional information. I think we need to try to draw a line in the sand that this is the document as of this date. And then, you know, the additional stuff, because I don't want to have to wait or, because there's so much communications, as Dusty brought out, that, you know, we have to do a communications campaign to get people up to a level where they understand the two primary models, one being proprietary and the other one being public. So, and the advantages and disadvantages, what they're going to give away for doing that versus, and then we have the other permutations, which we struggled with the other night when we had our meeting in Dresden, because we have options 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then we have 4A, B, C, and D, which are little changes in focus of that, of basically the muni model. Or even if you go the Fidium path, realistically, what are the different permutations that you could run into? But to me, that's a second pass, right? We need to close out this first pass, provide this for, this is the direction we as a town want to go, and see where all the pieces lie. I don't know what Wiscasset is going to do versus Woolwich versus Dresden, but each one is going to make it more or less a decision on their own. Hopefully we can stay unified in purpose, but.
I'll just say briefly, as you know, we'll find out a whole lot more on Tuesday night.
And
where
ours
the
is on
town
the
is
docket
going,
on
so-
Tuesday night as well.
I want to just put out there, I think that what we asked for in this RFP for this report was enough information to assess where our town's technology is, like what is currently up on the poles, what people currently get, and what are the different ways we could accomplish fiber to every single premises in the town. This report tells how it could happen if Axiom was the one that did it, right? But is this the only way that it could happen? So I want to make sure that we already had preliminary conversations in Woolwich with the select board on this, but I want to make sure that I'm telling them the whole story about how this would happen if GWI got involved, or if Pioneer was going to do it, or some other ISP was going to do it other than Axiom. I mean, Axiom's model is great and I love it, but there are other,
But we have to put it
there
out.
are other providers, and this was not an RFP for somebody to offer to build out fiber in our town. This was an RFP to assess where we are, so we could make some decisions, some informed decisions about what to do next. And that, which presumably one of those things we might do next is to put out an RFP for an ISP to actually do it.
I think in any case, I just was always assuming that after this report, even though we've had a close working relationship with Mark, that we have to put out an RFP.
Right. But so with that in mind, my question to Mark would be, is this document giving a neutral-ish perspective that would inform all of the possible paths that we could go down with various vendors that could do a similar job that Axiom might do? In other words, the economics or so Woolwich and Wiscasset would have to be each put up like $1 million basically to make this happen under this model. Is that the same amount that it would be if we did it with Pioneer?
I don't know, Mark, how do you respond?
I guess I would just say that I went through a relatively rigorous RFP process and gave very specific information of what was going to be in this report. And there was a very strong point of view that came from the evaluators of the RFP that they wanted to see very clearly this type of public-private model. So that's how I wrote the report. If you would like, so yes, there's a bias in the report to a public-private partnership. There's no question about that. So if you would like me to expand on the other options that might be available, I can do that. I would also urge you to consider bringing in those operators, which I can help with if you would like, to have conversations with them, for them to speak specifically about what they might offer you if they were to be a provider in the future. Most providers like to respond to RFPs, not to just general interest questions. So you will have to consider that as you move forward. But if this is something that you would like to see, I can expand that part of the report. I can remove the things that I was asked to put in, things like the spectrum analysis versus, I can take some of that stuff out to make the report more neutral and expanding some of those other areas. So up to you. If you'd like me to do that, it's just going to take me a little bit of time, given all the rest of the things that I need to do to in response to your initial reaction to the report.
Well, I mean, I don't know I'm not sure I know the right answer to that, because maybe it is the case that some other vendor like Pioneer would approach this in a completely different way, and the economics of it would be a completely different result. And you're right, Mark, if that's the case, then there's no way to find out unless we talk to them or whatever. So
Wasn't Pioneer solicited for this?
for the research, for the report?
Yeah.
I don't know, we were talking about Pioneer once, not, because doing the research and doing a report is not what Pioneer does. We've sent it out to firms that, the other, Axiom was the only one that was also a provider.
Yeah.
We sent it out to other firms that did only studies, and they were very expensive and provided information, at least from my point of view, that we didn't need. And so we didn't, at least that's how we judged it here.
But I guess when I saw the first draft of the report, I assumed, I don't know, if maybe it's correct, maybe it was a good assumption, that this would be a model that would apply to different vendors.
It could, yes.
And that, and if that's the case, then I think this report is a success.
I personally think that's true. I had, before I got involved with a formal committee, I brought some people and was passed it together in a 2019 meeting to pursue with GWI. I worked with them closely when I was at CEI, and good friends. They didn't want to touch Wiscasset because we were too small, and they knew what the makeup was of the town with mostly cable. If I got bigger, they said, if you got a regional group together, that would be more attractive. That was part of the inspiration to say, hey, well, Dresden, do you want to partner? But their approach is very similar from what I can see. They have a different scale than Mark does. They're bigger. They do tend to, they work out of state, not that far, but they work in Vermont. And we should definitely talk to them. I mean, sending out an RFP, first on my list, GWI, Pioneer, they're really good companies.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that what we would do, and I'm sorry, Mark, when I came across as confrontational, I didn't mean at all to sound that way. What I'm kind of thinking is that, okay, this is a great model that Mark has provided us. It so happens that Axiom uses this model, but they're not the only ones on the planet that could do it.
Right.
And if that's the case, then I can, with a straight face, tell our select board that this is a scheme, a model, a relationship that will work. And if something breaks and we need to hire a different ISP to do the job, other than the one that set it up, we could do it, because there'll be people out there that do this.
Yeah, I mean, there's a contract, 2-3 years. And then that's the beauty of it. You can change ISPs if you want.
Right, but if there's only one ISP that we're willing to work under this model, then making this decision is going to be to have a different dynamic.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's, because that's one thing I heard loud and clear from our select board, is that we don't want to be locked into one vendor. The town doesn't want to be spending a lot of energy babysitting or, auditing or whatever, the ISP that's running our broadband system. So we want to make sure that if other ISPs are not available to do this scheme, then we're going to be
I
in
think,
trouble.
yeah, I mean, there are other ISPs, but there's not enough market to have more than one vendor. That's part of the problem.
Yeah.
Even with 3 towns, and I think you said this in the report, Mark, that the scale is still not big enough that we could have 2 providers or provide more competition.
And Don and I talked,
Go ahead, Mark, and then maybe
Sorry,
Judy.
no. But you already have 2 providers, right?
Yeah, that's true. We have Spectrum.
Be adding a 3rd provider and expecting a 4th is probably very unlikely at this scale, extremely unlikely. So,
Simultaneously, yeah.
Yeah.
so
So,
that's the question. And I'll just make one last point to, I am happy to provide additional sort of expansion of the other options there. This model is essentially the model of what a utility would do, right? There's a sharing of revenue. How that happens can happen in a variety of ways and with a variety of flavor. So there are other options available to you, but as a utility or as a publicly owned entity, there would be a cost share there. Because people wanted to see the numbers, put a particular cost share position together to let people understand generally how this might work. So there will be lots of different iterations. Some companies, as you suggested, might not work at $30 per customer, blah, blah, blah. They might have to, there might be a different negotiation with them or something of that nature. But the fundamental issue here is that there is a sharing of revenue. In a private ownership model, that is never the case, right? They own it, they get the revenue, they do the servicing, they do everything. You do not have any control in that situation.
Judy, did
Correct.
you want to say
But
something?
in the Spectrum model, we get monies from them.
Yes,
In the cable model, we get a franchise fee back, right? The franchise credit. You could negotiate something theoretically, negotiate something similar. So there is some money's going back to the town. It
yes,
just won't be as generous as Axiom has proposed. But really what we're talking about regarding the report, I still stand behind from a feasibility standpoint. This is a great report. One of the things I did, Mark, is I took your logo across the top and I shrank it down because it's, in all fairness, our objectives were to be able to sell a solution, not a vendor, right? So I can share with you the edits that I did. You still are identified as prepared by, you guys have done a great job in meeting our request, but it was not intended to be Axiom's report. And I think Tommy just highlighted that, well, this is Axiom's solution. The reality is we solicited multiple sources for having the study done, and you were the acceptable bid, right? Several others chose not to. Other was 3 times the cost or whatever. So we did, and that got lost here, that we actually did initial qualifier and you won, right? So now with some skill, we can still get the important points across, still properly, extend credit that Mark and Axiom did a great job. But this is a technology report and the feasibility of bringing that to town. From an ISP standpoint, yes, Axiom is a strong contender, but as also noted, other ones may want to now get in the game. They didn't get in up front, but there are multiple steps here. We're looking at feasibility, design and engineering still needs to be done, and then the build and the operate. So each players can be different in those phases.
I also want to say that, as you know, the three towns all got the get ready money. I didn't realize we were actually going to get a check, but we get $10,000. And I thought they were just going to allocate in kind to us.
They don't know what.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, the question I had on the agenda, and we may not want to do this as much right now, was do we want to cooperate in any way on that Get Ready grant in terms of communication strategies? We can talk about this more later, and truthfully, I'll know better where Wiscasset is at after Tuesday. But it's a possibility.
Is that the, oh, no.
See, that was my concern when you guys were talking about it coming up on Tuesday. For a while, it seemed like I thought we were making progress, and then you were ahead of us. But now there seems to be, we still got to do homework. But being in lockstep, we all have the same challenge, right? Regarding communications and, kind of break the mold of what people are thinking. But at least get those alternatives out there and why, our recommendation is going to be one over the other. Initially with the select board and other concerned parties, but then using the Vermont concentric circle reference, we have to then extend it to other players. So we're kind of lining up the organizations that we're going to talk to, and it's all needs to be the same.
Yeah.
This is what and why do you agree? If not, we'll do more research to come up with the right answer. But we think we've done it.
I think that we've almost come to the brick wall of, if we do too much more time with too much more research, we're not going to be thinking about getting into a grant until next fall.
We want them to have confidence that we have done our homework.
And yeah, right. We've done our homework, and what we're going to come up with is broad strokes. There is no way we can come down with the specific details until we've bitten the bullet, and we've decided which ISP we want to use. And then we're going to be able to start talking the contracts, the specifics, the absolute nuts and bolts.
Yeah, well, I think we need to start earlier, actually, in terms of saying to the town, we do have a good idea of costs. It may vary with another ISP, but we do know where we're at on costs. We do know it takes a bite out of the towns to put money up, unless we go with, even Fidium wants money. I mean, it's not like that one is costless. So I think we will not make even an extended deadline if we don't get going now with the outreach. So
And I think the bottom line is, we've got, the next town meeting, which is in Woolwich, it's going to be in May or something, probably April. We're going to have to ask that it's okay to borrow $2 million to do this, or
probably
$1
gonna have to
million
do it before that.
or whatever. Well, I mean, it depends. I mean, it depends on what the timing of the grant thing is. But I mean, I see that as the next hoop we've got to jump through.
Oh, yeah.
And so we have to build up to whatever that is, at least in Woolwich.
Or a similar vote, because we recognize we're under special town meeting, because we don't want to wait till.
Woolwich, so the select board Woolwich does not want to do a special town meeting because it kind of dilutes the democratic process a little bit, because people don't show up to those. So
Essentially, we have better attendance at a special town meeting than we did at the annual.
It will take the outreach to say why it's so important, because I don't think we're gonna make it if it's May.
If you want to tell them there's a bond issue with $2 million on the line.
yeah, I mean, I don't know how that's going to play out, but I see that as the next decision that we need to make is we're going to have to decide what question to ask the town. And when do we have to ask it by? Those are the things that.
Mark, do you have input on this, having worked with other towns around referendum?
He's correct. 100%. Why are we doing this? How much is it going to cost? What are the steps to get that in front of voters, to have them make a decision?
And when do we have to do it by?
Yeah.
Well, fast. Lubec just voted for over $2 million. Freaking little town of Lubec. So you never know what you're gonna get in these towns through the process. So, you know, you'll have to decide how that process works in your individual town. In the meantime, I'm still a little unsettled, so I want to make sure I'm clear. I think what needs to happen for me to make me feel good about this moving forward is I need to hear specifically from each town what they would like to see, and I will deliver that for that particular town, overlaying the larger pieces that they see fit in the original report around the technology and other things that they may want to see or not see. But I'm happy to do that, and I'm happy to customize as each of the towns sees fit, and I'm happy to make it more neutral. I'm happy to do that. So to expand the other aspects of the report. So comfortable with whatever. So love to be able to talk to each of you about what the expectation was, what I fell down on, and how to fix it. So that, because I think it's hard. I still don't think I'm hearing three united voices generally. I hear you that it needs to be more neutral, but I think that each town is kind of looking for potentially a little bit different things, different iterations of things. So I don't want to rewrite a full report again and then get more questions. I want to get you there as quickly as possible so that you can move forward and be comfortable doing so. That makes sense, or maybe it doesn't.
Mark, one thing that we haven't really talked about at all is the bud. Do we want to talk about that, or should we just shut it down?
Are we ready to talk about it?
Well, it's in the report. This is the first time I've seen it, Mark talking about it.
Yeah,
And so it's sort of got some flesh on the bones now, but
well, we know that it advantages us in the grant process. There are extra points for that. There are extra points for scale of three towns coming together. So we know that's good. I think probably we have to know that everybody's on the same page with going ahead. And I have to say, I don't know where we're at yet in terms of Wisconsin. So,
Are you talking about the broadband committee? Or the
yeah,
select?
the select board. And maybe we have differences here too.
My opinion on that is that when I look at this, it seems to me that Mark and Axiom have kind of studied the whole situation and come up with an option or plan that appeals to people of Maine, that has, the revenue sharing. To me, that's like the gold standard in a sense. And anything that we give up in terms of revenue sharing or local control is going to be result from negotiations over this. And what do we get back for giving up some of that stuff if we don't accept everything? So that to me is where the process comes in, educating people and understand and make sure everybody understands exactly what we gain from it. So,
And then you get basic ideological.
I think it's
pushback too.
interesting just to listen to the conversation here, where we're talking about how much local control to maintain and how much to give up. And our conversation here has led us to saying, well, maybe we don't even want to use this ISP. So it's like, we want more control. Give us all the control. So
Well, I think it's more a town process.
That's the hardest sell.
Of needing to put it out to bid, and over a certain amount, you have to put stuff out to bid.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, and I suspect that what we want as a town and what Dresden Woolwich wants is going to be similar to what other towns our size want. And so there's probably not a whole lot of variety in what other options, just like a percentage.
well, actually, I think a lot of towns don't want to do any of this. They want somebody to come in and do it for them. So there are differences. I mean, I'm sure Mark, you've run into that a
Well,
lot.
I'm saying on our
Oh,
our
our
side,
three.
our scale. I don't know, like bigger cities, yeah, we'll say,
No, in Maine,
Come in here
I
and do
can
your
think of
business.
examples in Maine that people just said, no, we're not going down this route, too hard, too much work. We'll give our grant money and have somebody do it for us.
And
Yeah.
that's the Fidium. The reality is, we talk about the bud as axiom, well, Fidium's proposing the same thing.
We have to check it out.
Only we don't.
But that's how
we
they're
don't
gonna
own
go to score points and get money, right? They're gonna basically take the grants that we would have pursued, but they, because they've already said, what is it, Southport and
Booth
Bay,
Bay.
But I think the bud,
because they don't have to be contiguous.
the bud idea, at least as presented by Mark, is really just aggregating the three towns
Right.
into one block. So it's the same amount of local control, the same money, except it's not, it's a new municipality or a new organization that actually governs it. And I
Right, so you have to have
presume
the
each town would appoint, somebody to represent that.
But you have to
town.
have the cooperation of.
Yeah, no, I mean,
inspectors from
things like
towns.
pricing would have to be agreeable to all the towns, and
yeah, that's when like the select board will get into.
Bonding,
and then
if
the
they
budget
wanted to
committee will-
bond, that would have to be.
bond, yeah, well, you only can do revenue bond if it's a bud, so that means you're paying a higher interest rate, so maybe that makes it less attractive, and then stuff like,
Well, maybe we just go through the pros and cons of it. We're not there yet, so maybe.
no, I think we're a long way, I don't think, it seems highly unlikely that we could stand up a bud in time to write a grant.
I don't know. Mark, what do you think?
I think it's extremely unlikely that you could stand up above, but in time.
Is that the echo?
Well, and Justin, the committee, and another one of the select board members that I met with, they don't think the town is gonna put up enough money. They say there's no way we can have a vote, and we're asking the town to come up with $500,000 in order to just get this thing going. They like the municipal, they like the sound of the bud, but they don't believe that there's any snowball's chance in hell that Dresden is gonna go with that.
Well, that's often the consideration all over Maine.
Yeah, that's the poll we get. Oh,
Yeah, that's exactly it. Do people want to be on the line? And that's why Midcoast just said, we're not doing it this way. We're not going to ask towns for money. They tried asking the county for money and that backfired. So they thought they could get it at the county level.
Bath got away with 14 million for a new firehouse.
Well, I just sat in a meeting the other day about the wastewater treatment plant. And what they told us is that for about a fourth of the town, 800 subscribers, we're gonna have to come up with about $30 million to fix that plant. So there's no way we can come up with that, and there's no way we're gonna condemn 800 homes either. So something's gonna happen. Magical municipal money somehow.
Well, I kept getting told, oh no, the feds are going to cover that.
Something's gonna happen.
That's what I was
Neither of those consequences are gonna be allowed to happen.
That treatment plan issue has been hanging over our discussion around broadband for a number of years.
Since the very first meeting I came to.
It's a shame that MCA settled on the Starlink cost as the qualifier for skin in the game, because I think that reflects a model that was already skewed. That's where the 700 came from. It should have been 450, which is more of what it's going to take to connect. But the towns need to be responsible for connection, not for setting the beam.
Yeah,
Because in our town, it would have been a lot easier to go after 450 per household than 700.
I think though, they also recognize they don't have enough money for the state. So it's generous, it's very generous in terms of the leverage. But I think it's also, trying to get some revenue back, or spreading out what they have a little bit further. Are there other questions for Mark or Tom? Are you still on the line or not? Yeah.
I am, but I'm all set for now. Thank you.
Okay, great. Do we have any other things we want to bring up right now? Should we plan to meet next week or 2 weeks? Do we want to?
Well, I like
Oh, wait a
this.
minute, 2 weeks is Christmas.
I like your suggestion next week.
Next week. Okay.
We'll have our meeting, we'll have our board, our select
Yeah,
board
we'll have a
meeting,
sense
and
where,
then we'll come in behind it with, okay, now what do we say?
yeah, okay, let's plan to do it next, what is that? I always get my dates wrong.
22nd.
Judy usually corrects me. I'm taking a former, you know,
Last week, no.
yeah, because I take a former one and then I always forget one of the dates. So it's the 22nd that we'll meet, same time, same place.
Sounds great.
Yeah, the get ready money can be used for, and this is quoting Kendra Joe. It can be used for mailing, printing, and cookies.
Cookies.
Did you get your materials from her?
So we can mail
Yes.
tickets.
What about advertising?
I didn't.
You know,
Yeah,
it's
whatever,
fine.
Whatever you need it for.
we can use to.
That's what she's saying is, if you needed to attract flies to your meeting, then get
Do it.
cookies.
Right, that's the cookies.
Yeah, no, I know. And then it can also be a second pair of eyes and whatever, who they have on contract. Also to look at the report and just tell us, you know, I don't know what we're gonna find out, but it's another set of eyes to look at. And so I assume some of the build out, Mark, if an ISP, if you're hired to do this, do you do all the further detail of building out as part of your cost, or is that additional for us?
It depends on how your RFP comes across. Because if you want an extremely detailed engineered construction, that's going to cost you between $100,000 and $200,000 per community, hands down, not even a question. If you want Axiom with our construction partner to give you a very good option, it would essentially be free to the town. If we were going to become the operator, you know, we would just work through that processes with you and make sure everything gets answered. Those project details have passed mustered across Maine, that the thing I just described.
Yeah.
I have found that the engineers in this space over-engineer and over-analyze and get a large fee for it, but it doesn't really add at the end of the day or benefit any additional. So whether it's Axiom or somebody else, again, I'm trying to be a little careful, but it's somebody else, you have both of those options. You don't have to spend, you're small towns. I mean, I know you think of maybe you're a little bit bigger than the smallest of towns, but really you're not very big. These are not hard projects to engineer particularly. So I think you have those both those options available to you. You could go out to RFP for engineering. And, you know, we work with engineers all the time. We can tell you who they are, relatively speaking, or at least a couple of them, and you can talk to them. That's another option for you. This is a very high level, relatively high level analysis, but this was done with my construction partner. Desktop, we haven't been out in the field yet, but desktop is pretty good. This is pretty good numbers, relatively speaking. Being out in the field does make a difference, because, you know, Carla's house is 2 miles into the woods, and, you know, well, how are we going to serve Carla? Or, you know, look at this stream over here, or where are these poles? We thought they were here, they're not here. There's all kinds of underground, you know, et cetera, et cetera. There's some things that you learn by being on the ground. So we'd like to be able to, you know, we'd like to we truth tell our construction costs, but generally speaking, we don't really charge for that.
And that's something the Get Ready grant is going to give us people to help with RFPs and deciding
To construct
exactly
an
what-
art and stuff like that, yeah.
So if Axiom is the only one who's offering this option, what would be the purpose of having an RFP?
Which
If
which
nobody
I,
else is willing to do this type of bill in this project.
No, there are others that do it.
Well, I know there's other ISPs, but are they willing to? do
Yeah,
this?
yeah, I mean, Pioneer did the broadband utility district in Callis, Baileyville. GWI is working with, public-private partnership model like this in Vermont and Mid-Coast if they get the money. So no, there are other ISPs that are working this way. Those are probably the best ones for
But
my
I'm
point of
willing
view.
to do it
You
on a
know,
small scale, because that's what.
and then,
said,
and
they
then
want.
the small scale issue. I don't know
Right.
if Pioneer would do a small scale issue like this.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about 4,000 entities between the three towns.
Yeah.
Right, and really, the threshold is 10,000.
Yeah.
And we had a conversation with ones that run the wires, basically, and I said, you don't have the economy of scale that will be attractive to them.
Yeah.
Because even with the 3 counts combined, we're still way below that threshold, so.
That was the end of that cop.
Carla, responding to your question earlier about working together with the Get Ready stuff, I do think there continues to be value in, sharing diagrams, presentations, ideas. I mean, I think that's really been the essence of this cooperative relationship anyway. So I certainly think there's value
Great,
in
yeah.
continuing that.
Can't hurt, and we're gonna be herded together at some point anyway, I assume, I don't know if everything's online or if they have meetings. I actually kind of liked having a meeting for a change, seeing people in person.
Yeah.
What a luxury.
No, this is a great table because it really boiled it down to 2 alternatives.
Yeah, I appreciate it, if you have to get that going, because I think it clarifies things for people.
Yeah, and I'd like to, I mean, we did a presentation similar to this to the select board in Woolwich that I probably
Be great if you
should
shared
have
it, yeah.
shared with you guys a few weeks ago when we did it, so sorry about that.
So one of the things I want to do is to probably have time to cut and paste the financial end of it. So it's presented to show potential income. Good, that haven't shown.
Yeah.
And here again, to be updated when Mark updates whatever he's doing there for us.
Yep.
I haven't want anything other than 35%, but it's good to see it. It's good to see a lower rate be a little more realistic, because I think that's going to be the hardest thing to do. Yes, we will change that.
So Dusty, do you think it's worthwhile we get this together over the weekend and hand it out at the select board meeting as well, just a comparison?
Marcus, I'll be in touch with you on the document.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Don't call me sorry.
Was Evan on the call?
No,
Mark, we can send you a copy of this comparison.
oh, I sent one to him. Okay, so next week, same place, same time, and we'll have a whole lot more information, maybe, at least from this passage.
Share our stuff.
I think that's.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
I think so. I think we're over. Make a
Thanks,
motion to
Mark.
adjourn.
Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you. Bye. Well, we covered a lot of ground today, so that was good.
Another happy, get ready for Christmas.
Yeah. I'm glad, Dusty, I'm glad that Tom has been exposed to this idea from his friend.
Yeah.
That's helpful.